Sun Coast. Maybe I'm just homesick. Maybe sadness is romanticized. Human nature's playing the eye. Maybe I'm just plastic, pretending I'm elastic. Increase my mental Fahrenheit. Stretch me, melt me, leave me to fry. You son of a gun, been biting the bullet. Yours is a kingdom if you let me rule it. And happy pills and apathy, I can't be alone with me. Maybe we're just New Year's resolutions, making up problems, making up solutions. Maybe we're a day train living in the nighttime, staring at the dark, waiting for the sunshine. Maybe I'll be fine. Maybe I'll be just fine. Nothing is a sure thing. As Mother Nature's mood swings, unwind me like a VHS. Pull the plug into the rest. Your bushy-tailed white eyes in the bottle by my bedside. I need you 50 milligrams, hold you in the palm of my hand. Well, I paid you 50 milligrams, hold you in the palm of my hand. Maybe we're just New Year's resolutions, making up problems, making up solutions. Maybe we're a day train living in the nighttime, staring at the dark, waiting for the sun. Maybe we're just New Year's resolutions, making up problems, making up solutions. Maybe we're a hairline going through some hard times. Take this puppy west to a red wine skyline. Maybe I'll be fine. Maybe I'll be just fine. Hey! Let's get a little loud. Maybe I'll be fine. Maybe I'll be just fine. Maybe I'll be fine. Maybe I'll be just Time says, don't move, play it safe. Clock ticks, whispers, walk away. My past mistakes beckoning, but you're here with me. You're here with me. You're clear this time. Never thought I'd go walking this far. So my song. Mercy guides me, beckoning. Still you're here with me. You're here with me. You're calling out of this time. I'll never fall. I know I'm in this storm. Somehow it feels like my home. I can just tie up after your heart. You're calling out of this time. I'll never fall. I know I'm in this storm. Somehow it feels like my home. I can just tie up after your heart. Call me to the valley, I'm home. You call me to the mountain, I'm home. Jesus, I will trust you. I know wherever you call, that's home. You call me to the wasteland, I'm home. You call me to the promise, I'm home. Jesus, I will trust you. I know wherever you call me, that's home. I'm I go walking this far, but somehow it feels like my home. Walking this tightrope after your heart. On a road marked independent, I left home to find my way. There my feet have found a rhythm, my worries seem to fade. Oh, we battered boots and shallow roots, nothing held me still. Scattered pursuits of myself without you's what I want, still part of your will. Lean into all my wants and wishes, I lean into my thoughts and wildest dreams, holding on to all my heart's desires in this reckless pursuit of me. And every single line like casting shadows seem to read these words I often think, holding my own breath till my heart expires. Is this the place I long to reach? In this reckless pursuit of me. pursuit of me. And every single line like casting shadows seem to read these words I often hear. Holding my own breath till my heart expires. Is this a place alone to lose? In this reckless pursuit of me. In your boundlessness, you found this mess. You saw me here within it. The same road I walk is a road you run to welcome me home again. Maybe the space that I made was to measure your grace. Still it stretches out beyond to every faded heart in the worlds they part. You shine away home again. And as your tears fall and my fears fail, your love still stands to hold. And every doubt weighed against love's embrace has broken, lean into hope. And as your love lives to carry on, this light will shine through every dawn to reach the ones who reach beyond and learn to lean into love. Will I learn to lean into love? Will I learn to lean into love? Will I learn to lean into
I know it hurts, it's hard to breathe sometimes. These nights are long, you've lost the will to fight. Is anybody out there? Can you lead me to the light? to breathe sometimes.
You are light, dwell inside the darkness, a place where my heart is scared. You call me there, remind my fear that love is overcoming. This darkness you wanted me to know you're here. In the unknown, I've never known so much. In this mystery, for fear is hard to love. Or hear my wonder can wander away, and my restless heart can rest inside your grace. Where my heart is, to out beyond the stars, and teach my heart to love beyond my comfort, from a place where we once were to wherever you may call. Oh, in the unknown, I've never known so much. In this mystery, where fear is hard to love. Oh, hear my wonder can wander away. When my restless heart can rest inside your grace. singing out with us. Enjoy the rest of the service.
Good morning. It's good to see you today. Thank you so much for being here. So let's try that one more time. Good morning. We live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, don't we? I mean, this is going to be a picture of paradise. And I want to share some things that are happening in the future of Suncoast. One of them is the most immediate. I'm taking a group of people on the Rhine and Moselle, Romance of the Rhine and Moselle. It's a river trip, kind of like a Viking trip. It's really just a group from Suncoast, but I'm not trying to recruit you, but if you want to do something like a river cruise in the fall, October this year, pick up one of these brochures or in the Grand Circle, they're at the Grand Central in the hall. So I just something a group of us are going. Usually it'll be about 25 that do that. And if that doesn't strike your fancy, how about Holy Land 1 year from now? It's January the 25th through February 3rd. This will be my 7th trip going to Israel and taking people. The last few times I've taken 35 at a time. This time it may be 40 or 50 or more. But if you're interested, we were saying, kids 12 and up, or maybe a little 11 and a half may work. But anyways, if you're interested in doing an Israel trip, pick up one of these brochures in the Grand Hall. But let me remind you, these things cost money. If you think they're free, they're not. As a matter of the river trip is several $1,000s. This is subsidized for about $3,500 bucks. The Holy Land is about as inexpensive as you can go, including everything. But if you can't afford either one of those, I've got great news for you. We're having a Hawkins Road Festival that's just about 2 weeks from now, right here. So you can come to the festival, and it's a free event, so you don't have to spend any money. There's going to be these big blow-up houses for the kids to play, and there's food trucks. That'll cost you a little, but there's all kinds of vendors and those kinds of things. This is a celebration. It's from 11 o'clock until 4 o'clock on February 11th. And if you want to volunteer with that, you can stop by Grand Circle and say, hey, I want to go to the free event, Hawkins Road Festival, and you just saw the information about that. So that's coming. And next week, 1 week from today, is an open house event here. And in your notes today, you should have 2 of these cards, just like that. Look at that over. An open house event simply says that once in a while we started to realize, someone said, you're the best kept secret in Sarasota. You've got a message that's unique in a lot of the Christian community. You've got great music and good solid teaching, and we'd like to get the word out. So we simply are asking you to invite some friends. So we give you some cards. This is a reason to do that, and we'll talk more about that right at the very end. But today we're in the last of 4 teachings on worship. And if you haven't been here for any of the previous 3 and you want to find out what we said, you can go online. They're all listed there. But the first week in worship, we talked about, how it's important for us to open our hearts to God. How that it's simply this, that Christ is with us. From the very beginning, Christ has been with us. And the second week, we talked about the basis for worship is confession. That when I begin to confess what I need, then God begins to meet me at my point of need. Confession. Confession is not for someone else. I mean, it's so much easier for me to look around and say, I want to confess all the things you're doing wrong. And that's what it used to be when I grew up in church. It was the preacher telling us what we needed to do to right ourselves. But really, it's me confessing for me and you confessing for you. And God meets us. The third week was the basis for worship is realizing he touches us at our point of need, lips to lips. I use the example that some people are so timid, and we think they're spiritual because they're timid. For them, God kicks them in the butt and tells them to speak up. And there are other people that are so loud, and God says, you need to cheer down and you need to cheer up. Somewhere he's in there right at our point of need to try to get us a little more out of our comfort zone here, maybe a little more out of our comfort zone there. So let's look at the passage from Isaiah 6. We've looked at it a lot. I don't think you've memorized the whole thing yet, so I'll read it for you one more time. But you'll remember it if from last week and the week before, the 2 weeks before. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, these are angels, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. And at the sound of their voices, the doorposts and threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King. See, in that day, you couldn't look upon God and live. But in this vision, he could see God. My eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it, he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips, and your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. Today I want to talk to you about worship. The basis is Christ with us. Week 2, confession. Week 3, touch at my point of need. Today I want to talk to you about availability. I'm amazed at how efficient we become in society. You know, we can talk on the phone, eat fast food, and drive. And while we're driving, we can text, drink a Starbucks, and simultaneously use our mobile banking app. We're very talented. Not only are we better at multitasking, we become more productive and more efficient. We have increased pace where more is required of us. And so we race through life faster and faster, becoming busier and busier. Don Whitney, a professor at a seminary, writes this: the result is that the result that in our busyness, we are becoming increasingly efficient at leading meaningless lives. Today, we can get singular in our focus for just a moment and ponder this statement with no distraction. If we could just get less efficient and more meaning. How do we do that? Well, we submit our life to God. We surrender our future to him. We make him the priority of our focus. Then we're set free truly, I think, to worship. But today, we are more accessible to others than ever before. Cell phones. Anybody here not have a cell phone? We all have them. Email, text messaging, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It used to not be that way. I'm just curious. Does anybody remember the time when raise your hand, before cell phones? Do you remember that? Oh, yeah. There's a lot of us. My grandkids don't remember that at all. Now I ask the next one. Do you remember pagers? Yes. Oh, I hate pagers. I was a maintenance guy during seminary, and I was for this huge apartment complex. And every other weekend, I wore a pager because I was on call. It didn't matter whether at church or whatever, when the pager went off, you had to go in, find out, oh, there's a big, it was only for emergency. Here's the maintenance emergency. My kitchen faucet is dripping every 5 seconds. Well, can it wait till tomorrow? Well, if I went out, it could. I'd say, yeah, we don't have that washer right here. We didn't because it was in the shop. But I refused to do some of those things. But I did not like my pagers. As a matter of fact, more than once, they fly across the room and they become damaged. I mean, I'm much more mature now because I don't have them. Then I got my first cell phone. Remember cell phones when you first got them? I was an early adopter. I had the cell phone, and I remember thinking, man, this is great. And the person that called me most was my wife. You know what she usually said? Can you bring home a gallon of milk? I said, I'd pay all this money for this early cell phone so I can bring home. Of course, it wasn't just not a little, this was like a cell phone. I carried around a brick. But can I remind you this? No matter how long we've lived, God has always been accessible to you and me. Before cell phones, before pagers, before phones. However, it's not my accessibility to you I want to talk about today. And it's not even God's accessibility to us I want to talk about today. What I want to ask about, the question I want to ask is, how accessible are we to God? Are we available? Now we look at the scripture in verses 5 through 8. Isaiah, is worshiping the Lord. And as he worships the Lord, it begins with a recognition, then confession, followed by the cold touching him at his point of need. And what follows is a cleansing from the touch of God. Now, Isaiah the prophet receives a level of commitment never before experienced. In verse 8, in response to God's question, what's the question? God says, whom shall I send? Whom shall we send? Who will go for us? And Isaiah answers a word. And I've never heard this study before, but I got this Hebrew thing going in me. I read the language and I started studying this word. And here's the word. I'm going to teach it to you today. It's he-ne-ni. Now here's what I want. I'm not a she, I'm a he. So you got that, he is the first word. That's easy. And what does a horse do when it whinnies? It neighs, right? He, neigh, knee. Got it? He, neigh, knee. So let's say it together. He, neigh, knee. And one more time. He, neigh, knee. You got it. You guys are Hebrew scholars. So what does it mean? In the Hebrew, who will go for us? The Hebrew word is hineni, which means, here am I, send me. Hineni, I began to study it through all the different places, and I found in Genesis, Adam, after he had eaten the fruit, the forbidden fruit from the garden, and he realized he was naked, so he was hiding in the garden, and God comes for a walk in the cool of Eden, and he calls out to Adam, Adam, where are you? Where are you? In the first instance, he responds, hineni, I'm here. Here am I. And God says, come out of hiding. And then there's a big conversation about what's going on. And then later in Genesis, Abraham is called by God, and he's called by God to serve him and to awaken this new concept of who God is. And Abraham responds, he says, Abraham, and he says, hineni, I'm here. Then he says, go sacrifice your son Isaac on the mountain. And just as he's about to sacrifice Isaac on the mountain, he's got the knife in hand. God says, Abram, hineni, stop. You've proved your love to me. Don't go through with that anymore. In Exodus, Moses is on the mountain, and there's this bush burning, and he walks up, and he hears his name, Moses. His response is, hineni, go deliver my people from bondage. Samuel, as a boy, he's under the priest Eli, and he hears his name, Samuel, and he gets up and he goes to Eli and he says, hineni, I didn't call you, go back to bed. The second time he comes up, hineni, I didn't call you. The third time, Eli says, look, you need to go back to bed, and this time when he answers, just say, hineni, God, because God is trying to tell you something, and he listened. In Isaiah 6, God asked loud in this vision, whom shall we send? Hineni, here am I, send me. But I want you to know, it means more than just I'm here. It's not just a roll call, you know, Larry, Bob, Stephen, all these other things, Dan. It's not a roll call, here, here, here. What it really is a response to say, not only am I here, but I'm all in to whatever you want. I mean, for Abraham, it means I will follow you. For Moses, immediately they got instruction, go deliver my people from Israel. It's more than just I'm here. I am here and I'm ready to go whatever you want. Most of you know my home state is Tennessee. It's called the volunteer state. Why is it called that? Because in 1812, so many volunteered for the War of 1812 under Andrew Jackson. And I wonder what would happen if we at Suncoast became the volunteer state. If every time we heard something, we'd say, hineni, here I am, God, send me. Like a school child who knows the answer to the teacher's question, and we hear our name, we go, oh, pick me, I've got the answer. Just choose me. No matter what it is, choose me. Isaiah says, send me. His commitment is so deep, he's at the disposal of God. God is not only free to bring to Isaiah any circumstance, but he can take Isaiah any place he wants in service. See, Isaiah was a prophet who wrote in the time of exile, before and during exile. And whether in exile or very far from home, he was ready to do whatever God asked. Maybe it's to go to the rulers of that exile country and say, hey, we want to go back. Or he was willing to go to Jerusalem He was all in. There are many who can accept whatever God brings our way, but full commitment says God can send us wherever he chooses in his way, his direction. So it leads me to three thoughts today, and they're in your notes. You can fill in the blank if you want. Three thoughts. Number one, my commitment flows from my connection. See, cleansing, we can never be fully God's until we give him our heart. Isaiah confesses to God in this vision, he is a man of unclean lips, and the Lord touches him at the point of need. The live coal touches his lips, and he was clean. See, God's life essence touches us where we are. God's whisper is God calling us to more. Hearing the voice of God is our challenge today. Isaiah had seen the Lord. He had heard the seraphim sing his praises. So he saw God, which he shouldn't have seen, and now he hears God for the first time. You know, it's one thing to see and experience the hand of God. It's another thing to hear his voice and obey. See, I've been a parent 3 times when my kids were 2 years old. I've been a grandparent 5 times when my grandkids are 2 years old. And you know what do Christians have in common with 2-year-olds? They see and hear, yet they do not listen or respond as if they hear what we say. Some say, no, that's not my kids, that's my spouse. No, that's a different story. But it is true in the life of the believer. They see God at work, but sometimes miss his voice. I love to tell this story. I've told it before, but my mother's 96 years old, and I grew up in a family with 9 children in Nashville. My dad was a railroad car mechanic for L&N Railroad, Louisville Nashville Railroad. My mother worked at a bindery. That's a printing store at night, and she worked binding books. Remember the Highlights magazine that came out? Her company did those. And we got all kinds of literature, which I was an avid reader. I loved it. But my mom and dad both, I never remember them working during the day. They always worked from 11 to 7. Now, why that is, I don't know. Maybe it's because in the morning their kids would all go to school, they'd have a little life, they could sleep, but that was their schedule. Maybe it's because they made more money. But I do know that many times I was not allowed to go to Gary's house, my friend who lived a block away. And we were definitely allowed to go in the woods behind that near the railroad tracks. But when my mom would come home at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'd get home from school at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she'd be sleeping. So I'd go in and ask Mom, I said, Mom, can I go to Gary's house? Oh, I'm trying to sleep. Mom, can I go to the woods? Oh, I'm trying to sleep. Go away. Mom, just say yes. Oh, what do you want? Just say yes. Yes. Later on, I'd come home. Where have you been? I went to Gary's house. What are you doing there? You shouldn't have gone there. You go to the woods too? Yes. I told you can't go there. Mom, you said yes. I asked you, and you made an exception. You said yes. In reality, I put words in her mouth. I coached her to say what I wanted her to say. Now, here's my question. Have you ever heard only what you want to hear? You ever do that to God? You ever encourage him to say exactly what you want to hear? If you have not, you're a rare person. We all seem to do that. We hear what we want to hear, which leads to the second thought is this. Availability, not busyness, is the evidence of commitment. There are many who show their full consecration to Jesus by their activities and responsibilities in the church. Many admit to be involved in church, but later confess it's really not for Christ, it's because people, or I just needed something to do. Isaiah had been busy doing what prophets do, but now in a worship experience, he recognized his uncleanness and his lack of commitment. It reminds me of Luke chapter 10, where Mary sits at the Lord's feet and listens to what Jesus had to say. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And Martha was a little bit annoyed at Mary. Mary's sitting down, Martha's doing all the work. And she comes in and she says, Jesus, tell her to help me. Jesus responds, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about so many things, but a few things are needed, and indeed only one. And Mary has chosen the better. It will not be taken away from her. There are many of us who are Martha in the story. We're busy, we're at it, we're doing lots of things, but sometimes we're too busy for that which is most important. One of the evidences of a successful life is not busyness, it's balance. Now, folks, I want you to hear me very clearly today. Father, forgive me. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Let me say it again. Father, forgive me because I am too busy and I need better balance. And I live among a people who are too busy and need a better balance. See, my commitment flows from my connection. Availability, not busyness, is the evidence of commitment, which leads me to the last thought of the day. It's this: offering myself to God is the highest form of worship. I told this story not too long ago, but I think it was at 9 o'clock. I didn't tell it at 10:30, so today you get the story. It's a story of pastors at a conference. And they're sharing tips on ministry. And the subject of how pastor's salary came up. How do you determine the pastor's salary? How much does the pastor keep of the offering? And I'm going to pick on a few of the main lines. Forgive me if that's your history. But a Baptist preacher said, well, this is the way we do it in our church. We draw a large circle on the ground, and I stand in the middle. And they give me the offering, and I throw up the offering, and that which stays in the circle is mine to keep, is for me, and what's outside the circle we use for God. It's pretty good. And the Methodist guy said, that's not the way we do it. We have a small circle, and we draw a small circle, and we throw up all the money in the air, and then what comes down in the circle is for everyone else. What comes out outside the circle is for mine to keep. That's my salary. And the prosperity gospel guy said, well, you do it this way. We don't have a circle at all. We just take the money, we throw it all up in the air, and whatever God wants, he keeps. And the rest I get to keep. Now, this joke, and it is a joke, symbolizes how little some make their resources available to God. We set conditions on what God gets and how he gets to use it, and we determine that. But Isaiah is here to teach us we all belong to God, and all that we have also is connected to him. Offering all that we are, not in the circle or out of the circle or jumping off the ground or keep whatever, is really not the point. Here I am. Whom shall we send? He, nay, me. Send me. I want to be the one he sends. All I have is available to God. Isaiah, as most Old Testament prophets, would be considered unsuccessful. Prophets were often the voice of gloom and doom. They weren't foretellers, they were preachers. And the preachers said, look, if you keep living your life this way, disobeying the commands of God, if you keep living this self-centered life, it's going to lead to a life of calamity. If you're so busy all your life that you never have a chance to reflect and think about who you are and where you're going, it's not going to be good for you. Busyness is not the evidence of spirituality. It's not the evidence of commitment. These prophets were often honored, but sometimes they were not good for the politics, and the kings wanted to kill them. Sometimes they're sought after for counsel. Sometimes they're looked for to get rid of. No one seemed to listen very much to Isaiah. He proclaimed the upcoming disaster for the people of Israel, and then it happened. The country was devastated, and the people with him were taken into exile. Then his message changed. He began to say, not this is going to happen, but he began to change his message that one day, hope is coming. We can return home. Isaiah 43, listen to what he says. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Isaiah began to teach a message of hope, but still many did not listen. Not much changed. Not many changed their lifestyle. And his message seemed to fall on deaf ears. But if he had made a difference, if everyone had turned to God, I think the highlight of his ministry would have been the day he had the vision and he saw the Lord, and then he responded in submission, not by saying, God, I'm just too busy. But what he said is, here I am. Hineni, send me. One more insight from Isaiah 59. I love this. I mean, I've been studying this too much, this Hineni stuff, but one more insight from Isaiah 58. A message from God and God responding to Isaiah and the people in exile. Listen to what he says. I mean, all the responses, Hineni, have been our response to God's call. God calls, we hear the voice, Adam, Abraham, Moses, Isaiah. We hear the voice of God and we say Hineni is a response to him. This is different. The context is a weary people in exile, longing to go home, hoping that someday, somehow, they could return to Israel. This is what he says. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry out for help, and he will say, Hineni. That has changed my life. All of a sudden, I begin to realize it's not just me saying I'm all into God, but I begin to realize one day that God is all into me. He's always been into me. Even before I knew any better, even before I became a pastor, after I became a pastor, he's always been into my life, and he's always been in your life. We just don't see it because we're busy, because we're distracted, because we've been taught some theology that God is way out there instead of right here. What I've discovered, there's never been a day when God was not all in my life, in every issue. And what's my response? I just go right back at you. Hineni. I'm all in. At Suncoast Community Church, we value our community. We serve in many ways. We're not just consumers, but contributors. Consumers say, let someone else do it. I'm too busy. Contributors say, Hineni. I'm all in. Use me. In the 14th century, the social order was basically in 3 different tiers. It's not that way today, but it was then. The lowest tier was those who fight, the soldiers. And then above them were those who worked, the shopkeepers, the merchants, the farmers. But the highest group, believe it or not, in the 14th century, were the priests and the monks, those who would pray for everyone else to keep them in line. Today, there are many different social groups of people, but I want to suggest to you, all of us have the opportunity to pray because we understand that God is whispering to all of us. There are many different calls for our attention. Listen to what he says to us today. There's no greater act of worship, no more pleasing to God than these words of submission, volunteering our heart, saying, Hineni, I am yours, not just casually, but I'm all in. Send me. So the highest form of worship is a confession. No, it's part of it. Is it praise? Oh, it's part of worship. What about prayer? Oh, it's part of it. But I think the highest form of worship is the response, Hineni. Can I pray for you? Father, thank you for the love of God in our lives. Thank you for the challenge that we open our hearts to you, and we all, not only do we want you to come into our lives, but we realize you already have been here. Thank you for your love, your comfort. Thank you for your acceptance. Thank you for the day that when we confess to you that we are people of unclean lips, you said, I know, and I can take care of that. If you just listen to my voice and open your heart to me. Thank you for your goodness, for your grace, and the love of Christ, we pray. Amen. Would you stand, please? I'm going to tell you a story in closing. I was speaking to my mother this week. I talk to her 2 or 3 times a week. She's 96 years old, and I love to talk to her. She annoys me, but I still call her. If it's not one thing, it's your mother. And why do I call her so much? Because she's my mom, and I do love her, and she loves me. And I was speaking to her the other day, and she reminded me of a story of when she was a little girl, about 9 years old. Now, she's 96, so many years ago. Back in the times of Nashville, to where, you know, the big social programs were on. I mean, we'd just gone through the Great Depression. During that whole time, it was terrible. And during that time, she said, we lived in a little house, she and her sisters and her mom and dad, in Nashville, in the city, and their house had a dirt floor. She said, my job was to sweep the dirt floor. And I go, this is not something you read in frontier books about ancient. This is my mom. It's not that far removed. And she said, but there was a day that they brought a tent revival to town. And it was at 510 Woodland Street in downtown Nashville. And I got a little brochure about it, and I went there. And I listened to this preacher preach, and I realized that I needed God in my life. And she said, I asked God into my life. And she said, not only that, but I went back the next night. It was for 2 weeks. She said, before long, after a few nights, I took my mom and my dad and her sisters. And she said she was 9 years old at the time, and she was the oldest of the kids. But because she went, her parents went, and her sisters went, and we grew up in that denomination because of that one meeting, that investment in community. For that, I'm very grateful. Next week is open house at Suncoast. You have these cards. Do you know You might pass these to somebody, a neighbor, a friend, an associate, a relative, and just say, hey, it's just a church that loves people. They're about giving back. We're a unique crowd. Our theology is wonderful. Our music is fantastic. Our preaching, yeah, we'll get by. And we're starting a new series on relationships next week, and you're going to love it. But as we do this, just pass about, say, and you never know, 85 years from now, there is somebody say, you know, somebody handed me a card, and it was a game changer. That's all it takes. Us contributing, being a part of the solution. I'm here to remind you that great things can happen. When God says, whom shall we send? Our answer is, he, nay, me. I'm all in. He loves you today. So do I. God bless. Thanks for coming.